friends, welcome back to my kitchen. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jen. I do cooking, canning, and food preservation videos every Tuesday, and I do vlogs on Friday. If that's the sort of content that you're into, I really hope that you'll consider subscribing and sticking around. Today we're going to be making a big batch of Irish potato and cabbage soup. On the day that I cooked this, the weather was like 60 degrees, it was hoodie weather, and I wanted something comforting for dinner. So I'm going to get started with frying up some bacon. Now I will link the original recipe down below in the description box so you can adjust the serving sizes that you need to suit your family. After I get my bacon on, I'm going to go ahead and get all of my vegetables prepped. This is going to be the hardest part of this entire meal, is just getting all your veggies peeled and chopped. I'm going to start by peeling some russet potatoes. You can use whatever kind of potatoes that you want. I like russets because they're a little more starchy and I enjoy a thick soup. So I'm getting them peeled and washed, and then I'm going to go ahead and get them diced up into about inch-sized cubes. I think that if you're a home canner, this is a really great recipe to use up some of your canned goods. You could use your canned potatoes and you could also use your canned carrots. But I would adjust the recipe by adding the pre-cooked, already canned carrots and potatoes right at the very end after everything else is done, because those will just need to be heated back through and they're not actually cooking. So I'm just going to try to keep the size of these potatoes pretty uniform so that they all cook at the same time. And then I'm going to move on to my other vegetables. Now, I'm not going to give you precise measurements on how much I used of each thing because I have 6 adults in my family, and you may not need as much soup as I do, which is why I suggested checking out the original recipe. They do have the ability to adjust the recipe for how much you need. So I'm using 2 medium onions here, and I'm just going to get them kind of chopped up, similar size to the potatoes, maybe a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to go ahead and move on to my garlic. Now, these are really, really large garlic cloves. This is some of the garlic that I grew this year. And while it looks like I'm using a lot of garlic here, larger garlic cloves are not always as strong as smaller cloves. So I'm using several, but if you don't like a lot of garlic, just tone it back. Or if you're using a different variety or a stronger flavored garlic, just use less. I have 2 carrots here that I'm going to slice. Now you could dice these up. The recipe recommended slicing them. If having the round pieces of carrots is kind of weird for you floating in your soup when everything else is diced, you could dice this up. My husband is not particularly a huge fan of cooked carrots, so I thought just leaving them in the round pieces like this would be easier for him to kind of pick around them, but it's personal preference. Do whatever works for you. If you want a more uniform soup, you can dice this up. I'm using a small cabbage here, and I did not end up using the whole cabbage or even the whole amount that I chopped up. I did save that back. I was going to just use that to make a cabbage salad. The recipe calls for shredded cabbage. I didn't want to get my box grater out just to shred cabbage, so I'm just slicing it kind of thinly. And I started off here with long pieces, and then I thought, well, maybe shorter ones would be better. So I just split the chunk that I'm cutting and start, you know, hand shredding smaller pieces. So once my bacon is nice and crispy, I'm going to go ahead and remove that from the pan, but I'm going to leave behind the bacon drippings and the fat. That is going to contribute to a lot of the flavor in this soup. And I don't mind bacon fat. It's a healthy fat, so as long as it's in moderation. I'm going to add my onions to that hot bacon fat, and I'm going to go ahead and saute those until they just start to turn a little translucent around the edges. I'm also going to use the moisture from the onions to try to scrape up some of those bacon drippings from the bottom of the pan. Once my onions are translucent, I'm going to go ahead and add my garlic, and I'm only going to saute this until I can smell it, until it starts to become fragrant. We don't want to burn our garlic. Burnt garlic is very bitter and it is not very tasty at all. Once I can smell the garlic, I'm going to add in all of my diced potatoes. And then to that, I'm going to add enough chicken stock to just cover the potatoes. Now you're going to have some evaporation while you're cooking, so I suggest you add just a tiny bit more than you think you might need. Even with the covered pan in the end, it did reduce some, which is fine. It just concentrates the flavor of your soup a little more. So I ended up using 2 quarts for all of these potatoes, and it was just the right amount of chicken stock. I did not have to add any water or anything else like that at the end. Just gonna get that in there, give it a big stir. Gonna kind of scrape at the bottom of the pan to get any of those little bits of bacon that I missed that were stuck onto my pan. And then I'm going to just add a couple of bay leaves. Remember how many you put in because you're gonna have to fish those out later. And then I'm gonna add some dried thyme. And then I'm gonna put salt and pepper to taste. If you have white pepper, that would probably be better, but I love black pepper and that's what I had on hand. Your seasonings, just add as much as you like. You're going to taste this soup again at the end, so don't worry if you don't think it's enough. You can always add more later. I'm going to give it a good stir. I'm going to put the lid on and I'm going to bring this up to temperature. When it starts to simmer, then I'm going to go ahead and add in my carrots. And put the lid back on this pan and I'm going to let it boil for about 20 minutes or so. Now, depending on how big you left your carrots and your potatoes, after 20 minutes, they should be soft. But you can go ahead and do a poke test on them at this point with a fork and make sure that they're nearly done. They don't have to be completely finished because the soup is going to cook a little longer when we add the cabbage in. And that is what I'm doing. I am just going to add cabbage until my pot is full. I didn't even bother measuring how much I put in there. I think for the amount of servings that I put on the recipe, it was 3 cups. So we're just going to pretend like this is 3 cups. I'd say 3 big handfuls is pretty close to 3 cups. So maybe I added just a little bit more. It was delicious. It was just the right amount of cabbage to give it a lovely texture. So this is just me breaking up some of the bigger pieces of the center of the cabbage. I just wanted to make sure everything cooked evenly. And sometimes the denser parts of the center of the cabbage can cook a little slower if you leave them stuck together. So another big stir at this point, and then the lid is going to go right back on, and I'm going to let this cook until the cabbage is done. I think I ended up giving this cabbage about 10 minutes with it on a pretty high temperature. And it was fine. It wasn't mushy at all. It still had some texture. It wasn't crunchy, but it wasn't mushy. So this is just me trying to find those 3 bay leaves that I had. Nobody wants to find that in their bowl. That's a very unpleasant texture. So I'm going to turn the heat all the way down, and once my soup stops boiling, I'm going to add heavy cream. Now this is totally optional. I have seen recipes where there is no heavy cream involved and they use half chicken stock, half stout beer. So, totally up to you. I like a creamy soup. In fact, I give this a taste here in just a second, decide it needs more salt and pepper, and then I decided I was going to go ahead and thicken it up just a little more with a cornstarch slurry. That's just really simple, a little cornstarch, a little cold water, give it a stir, and add it to your soup. Now the cornstarch has a tendency to go to the bottom, so make sure you stir it really well so it doesn't scorch to the bottom of the pan. And that thickened it up just right. And just a heads up, this soup, if you store it in the refrigerator overnight, is going to be super thick the next day, and it's going to be more like a chowder. At this point, it was still soupy, but when we went back for leftovers the next day, it was so thick. It was delicious. I think it was even better the second day. And, you can make a nice crusty bread to go with this, but I just toasted some French bread that I bought at the store. I cheated. Yes, I know. I'm going to top this with some of that crispy bacon that we did at the very beginning and a little parsley for garnish, and that is it. A nice warm bowl of thick soup on a nice chilly day. It's perfection. I really hope you guys give this a try. If you do, leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought about it. Until next time, friends, happy cooking.